Have you ever seen those girls on Instagram who seem like they're always on a vacation and you're just wondering like how does someone your age afford that? Well, I'm one of those girls. I'm 23 and since 2019 I've been to France, Spain, Italy, England, Jamaica, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, basically all major US cities a couple of times. And I travel about 4 to 6 times a year. In this video, I'm gonna be spilling all the tea about how I afford it.
Baby, but you know I'm about to keep you up. Welcome to my channel and today I'm about to teach you something.
If this is your first time seeing my face, hi, I'm Camilla. I'm all about living life to the fullest, and for me that means working hard to create the life of my dreams and playing hard so that I can enjoy it. So on this channel I share content along the lines of self-development, career and personal finance, but also lifestyle, beauty, and travel. If that sounds like something you're interested in, you're probably as nuanced as me, so you might as well subscribe and stick around and we can create and live out our dream lives together. In this video, I'm going to be sharing different ways that you can save money traveling, whether that be on transportation, lodging, activities, or time of year that you go. But first I want to talk about general lifestyle choices that will affect how much time and money you have to spend on travel. Obviously in this video, we're focusing on how to spend less on traveling, but you might also want to have more that you can spend on travel by saving in other areas of your life. Because how much money and time you're able to spend on travel is ultimately what's left over from how much time and money you need to fund other areas of your life. So first, living situation. The best way to have money to travel is to not pay to live anywhere. For some people early in their 20s, that looks like backpacking for a while, having a mobile home, or just not moving out of your parents' house yet. I'm in the bucket of not moving out of my parents' house yet. Although I do help out at home, I'm spending much less on living than most people who are living on their own would. And so for the past couple of years, I've been able to put more money into travel than someone who might be spending more money on an apartment or a mortgage. So if you have in mind to travel a lot for a year or two, maybe factor that into where you plan on living. Also, if travel is important to you in your life or you just plan to prioritize travel for a couple of years, you might want to factor that into the jobs or career paths that you go into. Things like having to do your job in person versus working remote hours, having to work long strict hours versus having a bit more flexibility, or even how much PTO a company gives you will all be things that affect how much you're able to travel. Another lifestyle choice that affects your ability to travel are just other responsibilities in your life. So if you have pets or kids or even like plants, that might affect one, your ability to get up and go when you want to, but also it might incur additional travel expenses when you do go, such as getting pet sitters. And the last thing to take into consideration are subscriptions. If you plan on traveling a lot for a year or two, maybe it doesn't make sense to get a really expensive gym membership because you won't even be there to use it that much, and you could be spending that money on traveling. All of these things are kind of in conflict with your ability to travel, so just all things to take into consideration. Next, queuing up for how you can save on transportation, lodging, and things like that, we want to look at what's most important to you. This is really important when identifying how to save on a trip, because not all savings are made equal and not everyone will feel as great with the savings that they get if they're not getting what they want out of an experience. But try to think of like, what's your thing? Do you really love fine dining? Do you love a nice hotel? Do you love amazing touristy experiences? Super comfy transportation? Is it how long you get to stay? Is it who you get to go with? If you're on a budget, I would recommend choosing 1 to 2 things that are like your non-negotiables for a trip. Maybe one of those things is a time thing and the other one is a money thing. And keep these in mind as your priority when planning a trip and make everything else negotiable. For me, I love a nice hotel and I want to get to my destination as quickly as possible. This means I may sacrifice expensive excursions, dining experiences, or even days of vacation in order to stay in the kind of hotel room that I want. Or I may spend more on a non-stop flight in order to save time and be able to be on the trip a bit longer. So the first barrier of traveling is figuring out how you'll get to where you're going. Honestly, the travel industry is dogging all of us right now, especially airlines, and the prices of these flights keep going up. But I actually just bought a flight to Jamaica for $400, so I think I have some tips to put y'all on to. The most obvious way to save on travel is to not go as far. For example, I live in New Jersey, If I wanted to go to a beautiful resort in Mexico, maybe I would go to Cancun instead of Cabo, because Cabo is on the farthest side of Mexico to me. That will probably mean that the flight will be more expensive, but I could probably get a great experience in Cancun as well. Last year for my birthday, I wanted to go to a tropical island, but I didn't really care which tropical island I went to. I was just gonna pick the cheapest option, and it so happened that Puerto Rico was my best option, and so I went to Puerto Rico and I had a blast. You can also save by going to less popular places. This is a catch-22 depending on where you're going, because sometimes if you're going to less popular places, they might not be as close to major airports, and therefore you'll spend a little bit more to like be able to get there. But a lot of times if you go to less popular tiny islands, it'll be a bit cheaper because there's not as much demand to go to those places. And speaking of demand, another way to save on flights is to travel during off seasons, which just means in less popular times of travel to those places. A great resource that I use to track when the best time to buy flights are is Hopper. Hopper basically is an app that lets you put in your destination of choice and the airport you'll be flying from, and it shows you when the best time historically is to get a ticket to that place, like when the cheapest tickets are available. Now, if we're talking international trips, a great way to save money with international trips is to do multi-city trips. So for example, if I was coming from New Jersey to London, it might be really expensive for me to get to London, but once I'm there in Europe, it's really easy to move around to different cities. So for example, I traveled abroad in 2019 for a study abroad trip, and my flight there was really expensive, over $1,000. But once I was there for 6 weeks, and every weekend I would go to like a different country, and it would cost 20 to 60 euros to get to that other country. The last tip for multi-city international travel is to travel using overnight buses. So this is what I did when I studied abroad. The girls that I was abroad with, we would get like $20, $30 overnight bus tickets from France to Italy, for example, and we would do it overnight, so it would be like 10 hours, but then we also wouldn't have to pay for a hotel for that night, so we were saving on travel and also on lodging. It's not the most luxurious way to travel, but you know, if you're really trying to save, then you're really trying to save. If you're looking for a company that offers buses like that, I used to use Flixbus when I was abroad, and I'll link it below. For domestic travel, you can apply the same mentality as multi-city international trips to domestic travel by taking advantage of layovers. You can save hundreds of dollars on flights by getting long layovers in random places, and you can make that a part of your trip. My favorite resource to find cheap layover tickets is Skiplagged, and an example of how I use Skiplagged is when I went to Jamaica 2 years ago. If I had flown round trip from New Jersey to Jamaica, my flight would have been over $800, but instead I flew from New Jersey straight to Jamaica. On the way back, I had an hour-long layover in Panama City. Then I had like a 36-hour layover in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and then I flew back to New Jersey, and my flight total was around $500. It may seem excessive to some people, but you want to pick things that make sense for you. So like, I had a friend who went on the trip who lived in Fort Lauderdale, so I just went back with her, stayed at her house for like a day and a half, and then flew back to New Jersey, and I just made it a part of the trip. Skiplagged is great for finding these kind of layovers because they do all of the calculations and like finding everything for you. I feel like doing this on your own would be really, really hard, so that has come in handy for me a lot. And the last way to save on transportation when traveling that I've used honestly so much is using travel points from loyalty programs or travel credit cards. And I'll talk more on that in a second, but like this year alone, I bought flights from New Jersey to Nashville, California, and Jamaica, and I've only spent $600 total on those flights because I used a bunch of travel points in order to do that. So travel points is a big way that I end up saving on travel, and we'll talk about it more in a second. Okay, now you've made it to your destination, but where are you gonna stay? The best way to save on lodging when you travel is to not pay for it. If you can stay with family or friend in cities that you're interested in visiting, or even just like friend of a friend kind of thing. That's always great. When I went to London, for example, I stayed with a friend of a friend from college, and that meant that I wasn't spending any money on lodging, so I could spend it on other stuff. Another way to save on lodging is by shaving days off of like the days that you're actually staying in a hotel or Airbnb or whatever, by getting overnight transportation. So whether that's overnight trains or buses or red eyes, these can really be helpful in shaving a day or two off. For example, if your budget for a trip is $800 and the hotel you're staying in is $150 a night, and you intend to stay for 3 nights, but you're able to shave off 1 night because you got a red-eye flight, now instead of paying $450 for your lodging, you're paying $300 for your lodging, and that extra $150 could be what makes it possible for you to actually get the flight in the first place, or spend it on activities, or put it towards another trip. In terms of saving money when you actually stay, think about the location where your hotel and Airbnb is. If it's possible to stay out of city center a little bit, usually those are a bit less expensive. And also, usually if you stay near the airport, those airports are cheaper and they offer like free transportation to and from the airport, which can help you save on an Uber or two. But obviously make sure you're staying in safe locations, and sometimes do the math. Like, I will put in what an Uber costs from a hotel to different places I want to go to know if it's really worth it to stay out of city center or if it makes more sense to be closer. And for lodging, the same thing with off-season applies. If you can travel when there's less demand to go to that place, then hotels and Airbnbs will be cheaper. For example, don't try to go to Boston in May if you don't need to, because May is graduation season and Boston has hella colleges and everyone's family is flying in to stay at a hotel to see their kids graduate, and so hotel prices are going to be higher then. And also, traveling with more people helps to bring costs down. Obviously you want to have comfortability, but like traveling with a friend versus traveling on your own is always going to cut the hotel price in half, which if you were going to pay $600 for a hotel, now it's $300, that math just makes sense to me. And once again, using loyalty points and credit card points for travel is really helpful with hotels. I've saved like a couple $1,000s on hotels using credit card points, so let's get into that a bit more. Okay, it's April right now, and already I've saved like $1,000 on travel using credit card points. First, let's talk about plain and simple loyalty programs, and then we'll get into travel credit cards. So when I talk about loyalty programs, I'm talking about airlines and hotels like Marriott or Delta, for example, that have loyalty programs that incentivize customers by giving customers points that they can use to save money on later purchases. Companies have these loyalty programs in order to incentivize customers to purchase through them and only them. So if United Airlines wants you to buy tickets through them and not through JetBlue, for example, they're going to try to give you some reason to return to them by giving you a bigger bang for your buck if you buy from them again later on. So loyalty programs are great if you already have an airline that you love and you pick, even if that flight is a bit more expensive than another company. So say you're an American Airlines girly and you fly American Airlines every time, their loyalty programs are going to be really good for you because you're going to be rewarded for buying tickets through them. However, if you're not really someone who sticks to the same company for hotels and airlines, you probably won't get that much out of loyalty programs because it takes a long time and a lot of purchases to build up points with one company, and buying from lots of different companies doesn't really help with that. For example, I love JetBlue. They're my favorite airline. I travel with them anytime it makes sense because they have extra leg room, free Wi-Fi, and name brand snacks. However, they don't really fly to all the places that I want to go. Like, they don't really fly from New Jersey to California. And also sometimes their flight is just more expensive than other airlines. And I'm not really that loyal to them that I'm going to pick them even if their flight is more expensive than another airline's flight. So basically investing my money with them to get points isn't really the best way for me to save money traveling by using points. On the other hand, Marriott is my favorite hotel chain right now. Usually when I travel, I stay at a Marriott, but I don't always stay at a hotel when I travel. Like, sometimes if I'm with a group, I might be at an Airbnb, or if I'm on an island, I may be at a resort, or I just might be staying with friends or family. And half of the time, this is the case. It's only the other half of the time that I'm staying at hotels. So basically, for me and my own personal situation, loyalty programs aren't the best way. That's okay, because there's another way to use travel points, and that's through travel credit cards. So far, I've had 2 travel credit cards. I've had the Marriott Bonvoy credit card, and now I have the Chase Sapphire Preferred credit card. My first card was a Marriott Bonvoy card, and honestly I got that because my dad also has one and because I like staying at Marriott. And I'll list the card stats on the screen, but I got a lot of value out of this card when I stayed at Marriott hotels. Basically, for any travel purchases I made using that card, I got like 2 points per dollar or 3 points per dollar I spent, but I could only use those points towards stays at Marriott hotels. This worked out for me because when I did stay at a Marriott hotel, I either didn't have to pay or it was significantly cheaper, and I'm talking saving like $100, $200. But again, it only applied to like maybe half or even 1/3 of my travel. Last year I realized I was spending way more on flights than I was on actual lodging when I traveled, and so I wanted to find a way to use travel points to save on flights rather than focusing it all on hotels, or even better, just being able to use it on either or. So I did some research and I ended up getting the Chase Sapphire Preferred card this year. I love this card so far. It's a $95 a year fee. You get a $60,000 points bonus if you spend like $3,000 or $4,000 in the first 3 months of having the card. You get 5 points per dollar you spend on travel that you book through the Chase Rewards portal. You get 3 points per dollar that you spend on travel outside of their own personal portal. So if you just go to unitedairlines.com and book a flight through them using your Chase Sapphire Preferred card, you'll get 3 points per dollar that you spend on that purchase. You also get 3 points per dollar that you spend on eating out, like restaurants or fast food. And there's a couple other ways that you can get points back too. And for any regular purchase that you make that's not an additional bonus, you just get 1 point per dollar that you spend. A lot of credit cards have those bonuses where if you spend a certain amount of money in the first few months of having your card, you'll get a lump sum bonus. This made sense for me because I had to pay tuition for my school class at the beginning of the year, and I just used the card to pay it, even though I had already saved to pay for that class. And on that note, let's talk about who should and shouldn't get travel credit cards. If you've never had a credit card before, I do not recommend getting a travel credit card as your first credit card unless you just have extreme self-discipline and will use your credit card wisely up front. Travel credit cards tend to have much higher interest rates. For example, I think my APR on the Chase Sapphire Preferred is like 25%. That would be a real issue if I was carrying a balance over month to month with the card. But because I've had other credit cards and learned my lesson about credit card debt and interest rates, I clear my balance every month, so nothing ever carries over and I don't get any interest charges. So if you're someone who likes to keep a balance, I would not recommend getting travel credit cards. And if you haven't had the opportunity to experiment yet with credit cards, I would recommend maybe starting with like a cashback card or something first, or something that just has an interest rate of like maybe 18% or lower. But if you already kind of know the ins and outs of credit cards and you're good about paying off your balance every month, then I think travel credit cards are a great way to rack up points that you can use to save on travel, especially if you know you have big expenses coming up and you can spend the money you need to get bonuses, or even just spend the money that you were already going to spend to get those points. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's briefly talk about food and activities. Of course, when you travel, you need to feed yourself and you need to find stuff to do. So, how to save money on food when you're traveling? 1, don't eat. No, but seriously, skipping meals sometimes has been a way that I've saved money while I was traveling, especially when I was abroad. Like, we just wouldn't eat breakfast and like wait to eat a late breakfast or brunch or lunch, or we would have 2 main meals of the day and just find a cheap snack in between. Also, maybe saving the big fancy dinners for like one time, or if you're on a long trip, maybe once a week, and the other time finding like cheap food that you can eat, or even going to a city and staying for a few days. You can go grocery shopping and plan to eat some of your meals in, if you're like in an Airbnb that has a kitchen, so that you're not constantly going out to buy food. Another great option is staying at hotels that have complimentary breakfast. A continental breakfast can really go a long way in cutting down expenses when you're traveling. And another way to save on eating is to go to events where there's going to be food at the event. For activities, really quickly, sightseeing is free. It's really great to just walk around someplace for free and look at what they have. That's always a fun time for me. Obviously, sometimes you want to do a bit more, but you can plan to do some sightseeing on certain days or for parts of a day, so you don't always have to pay for like someone to take you on a tour. Also, in a lot of places like New York or Barcelona or Chicago, a lot of things are free on Sundays. Like you can go to museums or expositions on Sundays for free. Sometimes it's like certain Sundays of the month, so Google is your friend there. Student discounts also come in handy. I always bring my student ID with me just in case they have a student discount, because usually places like museums and botanical gardens have student discounts, and sometimes those discounts mean you get in free. Also hit up Groupon. Sign up for free classes when you go places, like places that have like first class free. Like for example, when I went to Nashville recently, I did hot yoga at this place, and it was like your first class is $10 rather than like $45 for the class. So look up stuff like that when you go places. And also, if you're staying at a hotel, look and see what discounts you get through the hotel, because usually they have affiliate programs with nearby places. For example, when I went to San Diego, I was able to do this boat ride either for like free or half off with my friend because of the hotel we stayed at. So those are all my tips on how to travel on a budget. I hope you found it helpful, and if you did, please give this video a thumbs up. If you like this video, you might like this one over here, so go check it out, and otherwise I will see you in another video.